Read the following excerpt and answer questions 1 through 4. A folk tale from West Africa, retold by Hugh Lupton. Once upon a time there was a blind man who lived with his sister in a hut in a village on the edge of the forest. Now, this blind man was very clever. Even though his eyes saw nothing, he seemed to know more about the world than people whose eyes were as sharp as needles. He would sit outside his hut and talk to passerbys. If they had problems, they would ask him what they should do, and he would always give good advice. If there were things they wanted to know, he would tell them, and his answers were always the right ones. People would shake their heads with amazement and say, "Blind man, how is it that you are so wise?" The blind man would smile and say, "Because I see with my ears." Well, one time, the blind man's sister fell in love with a hunter from another village, and soon enough there was a wedding. The hunter was married to the blind man's sister. And when the great wedding feast was finished, the hunter came to live in the hut with his new wife. But the hunter had no time for his wife's brother. He had no time at all for the blind man. "What use," he would say, "is a man with no eyes?" And his wife would reply, "But husband, he knows more about the world than people who can see." The hunter would laugh and say, "Ha ha ha, what could a blind man who lives in darkness know? Ha ha ha." Every day the hunter would go into the forest with his traps and spears and arrows, and every evening when the hunter returned to the village, the blind man would say, "Please, let me come hunting in the forest with you tomorrow." But the hunter would shake his head. What use is a man with no eyes? And the days and the weeks and the months passed, and every evening the blind man asked, "Please, let me come hunting tomorrow." And every evening the hunter shook his head. But then, one evening, the hunter was in a good mood. He had returned home with a fine catch, a fat gazelle. His wife had prepared and cooked the meat, and when they'd finished eating, the hunter turned to the blind man and said, "Very well, tomorrow you will come hunting." So the next morning they set off into the forest together, the hunter with his traps, spears, and arrows, leading the blind man by the hand along the track between the trees. For hours and hours they walked. Then suddenly the blind man stopped. He tugged the hunter's hand, saying, "Shh, there's a lion." The hunter looked about, but he could see nothing at all. "There is a lion," said the blind man, "but it's all right. He's eaten and he's fast asleep. He won't hurt us." They carried on along the track, and there, sure enough, was a great lion stretched out fast asleep under a tree. As soon as they had passed it, the hunter asked, "How did you know about the lion?" "Because I see with my ears." And they continued deep, deep into the forest until they came to a clearing. The hunter said, "We'll have our traps here." The hunter set one of his traps, and he told the blind man how to set another one. When both traps were ready, the hunter said, "We'll come back tomorrow and see what we've caught." And together they made their way home to the village. The next morning they were up early. Once again they set off along the track into the forest. The hunter offered to hold the blind man's hand, but the blind man said, "No, I know the way now." The blind man walked ahead this time, and he didn't catch his foot on a root or a tree stump, and he didn't miss a single turn. They walked and they walked until they came to the clearing deep in the forest where the traps had been set. The hunter saw straight away that there was a bird caught in each trap, and he saw straight away that the bird caught in his trap was a little gray one, and the bird caught in the blind man's trap was a beauty, with feathers of green, crimson, and gold. "Sit down there," he said. "We've each caught a bird. I fetched them out of the traps." So the blind man sat down, and the hunter went across to the traps, and as he went across he was thinking to himself, "A man with no eyes will never know the difference." And what did he do? He gave the blind man the little gray bird, and he kept the beautiful bird with the green, crimson, and gold feathers for himself. And the blind man took the little gray bird in his hand, and he got to his feet, and they set off for home. They walked and they walked, and as they were walking, the hunter said, "If you're so clever, and you see with your ears, then answer me this. Why is there so much anger and hatred and warfare in this world?" And the blind man answered, "Because the world is full of so many people like you, who take what is not theirs." And suddenly the hunter was filled with bitter shame. He took the little gray bird out of the blind man's hand and gave him the beautiful green, crimson, and gold one instead. "I'm sorry," the hunter said. And they walked, and then the hunter said, "If you're so clever, and you see with your ears, then answer me this. Why is there so much love and kindness and gentleness in the world?" And the blind man answered, "Because the world is full of so many people like you who learn from their mistakes." And they walked until they came home to the village. And from that day onward, if the hunter heard anyone ask, "Blind man, how is it that you are so wise?" he would put his arm around the blind man's shoulder and say, "Because he sees with his ears and hears with his heart." Number 1. One possible way to express the lesson taught by the story is A. People's lives are enriched when they help others. B. Greed can make people make rash decisions. C. Physical abilities do not limit a person's value. D. Foolish people often create their own problems. Number 2. What would be a good title for this fairy tale? A. The hunter learns from a bird. B. Seeing clearly. C. Hunting for life. D. True gentleness in the world. Number 3. Which of the following sentences taken from the story is the most important in developing the theme of the story? A. If there were things they wanted to know, he would tell them, and his answers were always the right ones. Paragraph 3. B. So the blind man sat down, and the hunter went across to the traps, and as he went across, he was thinking to himself, "A man with no eyes will never know the difference." Paragraph 32. C. And the blind man took the little gray bird in his hand, and he got to his feet, and they set off for home. Paragraph 36. Or D. And the blind man answered, "Because the world is full of so many people like you who learn from their mistakes." Paragraph 42. Number 4. Which character is most important to the reader in developing the theme of the story? A. The blind man. B. The hunter. C. The gray birds. D. The crimson birds. Read the following Aesop fable and answer question 5. One hot summer's day, a fox was strolling through an orchard till he came to a bunch of grapes, just ripening on a vine, which had been trained over a lofty branch. "Just the thing to quench my thirst," quoth he. Drawing back a few paces, he took a run and a jump, and just missed the bunch. Turning round again with a 1, 2, 3, he jumped up, but with no greater success. Again and again he tried after the tempting morsel, but at last had to give it up, and walked away with his nose in the air, saying, "I am sure they are sour." Number 5. What is the theme of the fable? A. If at first you don't succeed, try again. B. Never give up on something you truly want. C. There is always a way to obtain what you desire most. D. It is easy to hate what you cannot have. Read the following passage and answer questions 6 through 8 that follow. Brother Coyote and Brother Cricket, as retold by J. Frank Dobie. One summer evening, about sundown, a coyote trotting across the plain put his foot down on a tuft of grass wherein a cricket was singing. Sereno in aquellos campos. Serene in those fields. The cricket jumped out and cried, "But Brother Coyote, why are you destroying my palace?" "I really did not know you lived here until you revealed yourself," the coyote said. "You are rude and you insult me," the cricket said. He was ready to spring away. "Insult you," the coyote jeered. "Why, you dwarf, I am merely seeking my living, and now that I have you, I'm going to eat you up. I'd rather have a red watermelon or a fat kid, but I eat a cricket or a grasshopper when it's handy. Maybe you will fill the hollow in one of my molars." "But, Brother Coyote," the cricket said, now in his soothing way, "it is not fair." The coyote sat down on the carpet of grass. "Brother Cricket," he said, "you know that when nature offers itself, it is fair for nature to accept. But, Brother Coyote, you haven't given me a chance." "Chance?" exclaimed the coyote. "Why, what sort of chance do you expect?" "I want to fight a duel." "You fight a duel with me?" And the coyote laughed. "Yes, fight a duel with you," the cricket said. "If I win, then my song will go on. If you win, then I'll fill the hollow in one of your respectable teeth." The coyote looked away, off across the plain, and saw a crow flying down and play at the waving tail of a striped skunk. "Well," he said, "perhaps the people need a comedy. All right, we'll have your duel, Brother Cricket." Okay, thank you very much, Brother Coyote. Now I sit here trembling at the sight of your armor and weapons, the Coyote said, but go on and name your terms. It is agreed, said the Cricket. You go and get your army together, and I will go and get my army together. Tomorrow, when the sun is straight overhead, you have your army on the prairie just above the water, called the Tank of the Seven Raccoons, and I will have my army in the thicket in the draw, just below the dam, to this tank. On the hour we shall engage in mortal combat. That is clear, gentle Cricket, said the Coyote. Until tomorrow at high noon. Adios. Adios, General Coyote. That night, General Coyote went east and west, north and south, summoning in his high voice his forces to gather on the prairie above the Tank of the Seven Raccoons. He summoned the lobo, the badger, the tiger of the deep canyon, the panther of the rim rock, the wildcat of the chaparral, the raccoon, the possum, the sharp fox, and all the other people with claws and teeth. And in a sing-song, General Cricket summoned his forces, the horseflies, the mosquitoes, the honeybees, the bumblebees, the yellow jackets, the black hornets, and even a colony of red ants, all the people that have stingers and can stick. He told them to gather in the thicket in the draw below the Tank of the Seven Raccoons. Long before high noon, the people of Fang and Claw were assembling on the prairie above the water tank. General Coyote was trotting about, looking this way and that way, smelling and listening. The sun stood straight up, and still he could not see one sign of General Cricket's army. Finally, he called the fox and ordered him to scout out the position of the enemy. With his long nose pointed ahead, his ears alert, and his eyes peeled, the fox went trotting down the draw. General Coyote was watching him when he came to the edge of the thicket. The fox flattened to the ground and began twisting into the brush. Just as he was poking his keen snout into a clump of white brush to see and smell more closely, General Cricket ordered a battalion of black hornets to assault him. They did, all at once. They stuck their stinger into his ears, into the corners of his eyes, into his nostrils, and into his flanks, into every spot of his body where hair is short and skin is tender. He snapped and pinched, but only for a minute. He turned 17 somersaults on the ground, and the black hornets came thicker. Then he streaked for the tank of water. He dived to escape his assaulters and went to the bottom. But in a minute, he had come back up for air. Then, sticking his long mouth out of the water, he cried at the top of his voice, "General Coyote, retreat! The enemies are upon us!" General Cricket had already ordered the Yellow Jackets to attack the army of giants on the prairie, and the war cries of the bumblebees were in the air. "Retreat!" the fox shrieked again. General Coyote tucked his tail between his legs and retreated, and every soldier in the army tucked his tail and retreated also, all except the bobcat. He retreated without tucking his tail. That is how General Cricket won the duel with General Coyote. Thus, a person should avoid being venangelous and considering himself shrewder than he is. He may be outwitted by his own vanity. Number 6. Which old saying best describes the theme of this story? A, look before you leap. B, the early bird catches the worm. C, slow and steady wins the race. D, appearances can be deceiving. Number 7. If you were to summarize this story, which event would need to be included in the summary? A, the coyote ignores the lowly cricket. B, the coyote agrees to a duel with the cricket. C, the black hornets drive Coyote into the water. D, the fox tells the animals of the fang to retreat. Number 8. The main idea of paragraph 15 is A, to show the coyote had no respect for the small insects. B, to demonstrate that the cricket was not scared of the coyote. C, to show the coyote was being fair with the cricket. D, to teach a lesson on jealousy.